Let's talk about books. These are the books I read in July, I think. Hang on. They are. Okay. So, what I was thinking we could do today is instead of going in the order that I read them in, we could go, I don't want to say by theme, but we could book ladder. So, I will start with a random selection and then I will try to pick the next book based on like some bridge of setting or character, something similar between that book and the next book, however tenuous that bridge may be. So we'll see if this is fun. So in July, I read Sunny Side Up by Katie Sturino. This was an arc, but I finished it after the book came out. So I did not read the advanced reader copy while it was advanced. This is a fun book and it was supposed to be fun and it was fun. And that's all you need. So I thought it was really interesting. The premise is that Sunny is the main character. She is an entrepreneur. She runs her own PR firm in Manhattan. She's super successful. She has just divorced her husband of 7 years, who she helped kind of launch his career as like a sports podcast guy, I think like a Dave Portnoy. And she is in a great spot in her career. She has great friends, but what she's trying to do is, or kind of over the course of the book, she is starting a new business venture, which is swimwear for all sizes, and she is dating and trying to find a partner. There's a lot of what's called autofiction, which is sort of like a cross between autobiography and fiction. So you're writing fiction sort of about yourself. And most autofiction in the like the way the genre is usually talked about is like really stuffy and really kind of smart, really I haven't seen very many people do like fun autofiction, which is like I'm into that. I'm into this. I liked it better than I thought that I would. Katie Sturino is a plus size woman who founded a company called Mega Babe, which does like anti-chafing sticks and that kind of thing, and is an entrepreneur. And so there's definitely like bits of her story in here. But honestly, I felt like it worked as a novel, which you guys know is like my big thing. Like, if you're going to make something fiction, it has to be able to stand on its own 2 feet. You can't just kind of rewrite your own story, Miss Katie, however you think that it might sound really cute for other people. No, it has to stand on its own, and it did stand on its own. So I thought it was fun. It's sort of also, I would say, it's like a beach read for a city. So it goes from January to June, and it's a swimwear line she's launching, so it has like beachy vibes and everything. But most go away or lie down, please, darling. Down. Rest. Good girl. I don't know what that on that is like, but Dakota has entered the building and would like attention. And I don't remember what I was saying. Oh, it's summery. It's like a beach read that's set in a city, and most beach reads are set at the actual beach, I feel like. So I thought that was kind of fun. I think there's also something kind of special about having a fat main character who has almost everything in their life together, like who has incredible friends, who is wealthy, and who is really good at their job. Like, I think that it's so easy to have limited media about fat characters. I think there's a huge limit on the media around like books and stuff about dynamic fat main characters, and Sunny in this one certainly is that. She also writes a Substack, which is kind of fun and funny, but I liked that feature of the book. That is something that keeps it a little bit fluffier and a little bit lighter. Like, the stakes are low because she already has one successful business. So if this other business doesn't take off, it's going to be fine. And that is another thing, like low stakes that you usually are looking for in like a fun book or a beach read. So Sunny Side Up. by Katie Strino. Check it out. Okay. Book ladder. I think I'm gonna regret this. No, okay. I was gonna go to Cavalier and Clay because New York. Instead, this is hard without knowing like where I'm gonna go from here. I think I can pull this off though. Also, I'm really warm, so that's why we're passing this ice pack around my lap. The next book I read, although it wasn't the next book I read sequentially, but the next one we're going to talk about is Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. This was her debut book. It's a short story collection and it was shortlisted for the National Book Award. I had not read it, but I had read In the Dream House by her, which this one is a memoir. It tells the story of an abusive queer relationship through different horror tropes. So the sections are really short. It's amazing. And I had been meaning to get to Her Body and Other Parties for a while. Finally did for my summer reading challenge at the shop. This one is a collection of stories. I would term it close to horror, but I don't read a lot of horror and I was fine reading it. So it wasn't too gross. There wasn't a lot of body horror. It wasn't too scary. It was just a really impressive way of explaining honest different facets of what it's like to be a woman, a girl in the world, and then the way she dramatizes or adds a little bit of magic or horror to the stories lands the hammer on whatever point she's trying to make a little bit stronger than otherwise. So I thought it was completely effective. I didn't love it, which I think is fine. And I think it's interesting to think about this versus In the Dream House. Like, not that all of the books someone writes, you have to like pick between them. But I also know that like when you're a reader, you do have to pick between books. Like there's too many books to read. And I would 1,000,000% say to read In the Dream House, unless you love short stories or you love horror. I do love seeing the amount of craft put into this book, and I think that it's worth reading. Let me see what I said. This is kind of is anaphora, is that the word for the literary trope that's like the same starting word over and over, is kind of what I did here, but it's short, so I'll read it. It's literature. It's horror. It's I don't know why I'm like laughing at myself, but it's a good write-up, so I'm gonna keep reading. Push through. It's horror. It's women haunted. It's creaking and flush and buzzing with ghosts and sex and sticky with detail. Polished and dark. Excellent. Which I think is super accurate. I feel like that's all I have to say about this. There's some really, all the stories are, you could say different things about each of them, but I don't care to. So I'm going to wrap it up there. But if you want more, let me know. Book ladder from that. Short stories. Oh. Okay. This is a jump to horror, which is Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. That's the word I'm putting on my label from Her Body and Other Parties to Nettle and Bone. These are both in the horror-ish genre. This is not shelved in horror in most bookstores. It's shelved in fiction and like literature. This one is shelved in horror, but probably should be shelved in fantasy because it wasn't horrifying. And the moments where it tried to be horror were a mess. So honestly, we're just gonna kind of laugh at this book together a little bit. I am warning you off. If you love this book, like just skip this section. I was talking to a bookseller at City Lit, telling them how I really wanted to find a horror book that I could recommend. And they recommended T. Kingfisher and Not Alone Bone. I said, cool. Two things I will say. One, it clipped along at a decent pace for a book I did not like. I actually didn't feel like the author was wasting my time, in the sense that like this book felt like it was about as short, if not as short as it could be, like short enough for me to not be mad at like the length and the pacing. It also had two, so in the main band of four characters, you've got your number one main character. Two of the other people in that group that are trying to solve this problem are old women. And it made me realize through watching them interact with each other and interact with the two younger characters how rare it is to have two old people, specifically like not married to each other, like two just like friendly, one of them is not as friendly, old people as main characters in a book, given like a bunch of depth and humor and dynamism and an interesting past. And it was really fun to see like how one of them is a fairy godmother and one of them is a dust wife, which is the name of someone who like caretakes a cemetery or something. And they have really different personalities from each other, and it was so fun to like hear them bicker with each other. And um that was a bright spot in the book. The the fact that you're trying to write horror and not succeeding in being horrifying makes it kind of silly. So there's one scene where they're going to the goblin market to find what they need to get to where they're trying to go. Very vague. They is the dust wife and the main character. And this is where they end up grabbing like the big tall man who slept in the fairy fort, and he becomes their like assistant person. You don't really know that yet. But in order to like buy him or like trade for him, I'm not going to get into the laws because they're actually not interesting, but the main character has to sacrifice a tooth. And the dust wife is like, well, you've had a tooth that's like been hurting you. I've seen you like wince while we're eating. And she's like, okay. I mean, called out, but yeah, I actually, ow. And then the lady's like, yeah, so you're gonna be fine. And so then like the guy's like, all right, I'll get my tooth puller. Cause it's like a goblin market, like picture like a craft fair, but like this guy's just selling teeth. And so he's like, oh, let me get my, and this crane, like this bird, it's like a man who has a bird head who has this like long beak. I read this like 2 months ago. I can still picture this scene. Like starts to like reach into I just set this down, I'm sorry. And like tap on the teeth. And then they start, all of the teeth in Mara's mouth start dancing a jig. And there's this line that's like, it wasn't painful. It was uncomfortable, but I would have preferred it be painful. And I was like, there are things like that in life, but like, I'm not convinced this is her teeth are like dancing around in her mouth, which I cannot picture. Like, I can't imagine that. And I can't imagine like it was not described compellingly to the point that it was humorous. It stuck in my head as something funny. And so eventually like the rotten tooth or whatever like gets out or gets sold. And it just was not scary. And there was a there was like some little writing mistakes. Like the author would like double down on describing one person like the same way over and over. There was this like guy at a different market who's like not a character. Like he's just someone who like sells them clothes or something. And his eyebrows get described like every time she brings him up, which is just like, I was listening the first time you told me he had eyebrows. There's also my other biggest issue was like at the beginning, this back and forth between timelines. It's confusing and it doesn't work and it's not helping at all. And that's structure is always going to be one of the most important things in a book. Usually, if it's great, you might not even notice it. And if it's bad, you're just so fussy. So I wouldn't recommend this. But it wasn't the worst book I've read. I think I gave it 2 stars. So I don't recommend it. Maybe you love it. From there, I think we're gonna go Hunger Games or Not If I Save You First. Let's go Not If I Save You First. Okay, by Ally Carter. My book ladder is gonna be main characters, young-ish. She's 16. I guess she's older, but it's from around. Main characters, female, whose names start with M and are 5 letters long. And they have to save someone important to them, and they are in, what do you call it, uninhabitable environment. Like, it's hard to find food. Not If I Save You First is a standalone YA novel by Ally Carter. Ally Carter of Gallagher Girls and High Society fame. Please hold. Oh. These are 2 other books by Ally Carter. This one is the first in a 3-series book about thieves, a family of thieves. I love this one, even though the cover is horrifying. This one is the first of 6, a series about a girl who goes to school for spies, a boarding school for spies. And she's great. She's fun. She lives in Tulsa. We love that. I bought this, apparently, for Abigail years ago. And I hadn't read it, but because it was Ally Carter, easy to buy. She told me later it was like one of her favorites. Really fun to reread. So, oh no. Could you hear me? I love technology. This is a standalone book she wrote where the 2 main characters are childhood best friends. Maddie and Logan are, their dads work together. So Logan's dad is the president of the United States, and Maddie's dad is the head of Secret Security. And when they're about 8 at this dinner, there's a Russian kidnapping attempt on the president's wife, which will kind of come back to the bad guy aspect of that. But the kids are in this like hallway under the White House, Maddie and Logan, and they see it. And then Logan presses like the security button or whatever, which is great. And so after that, Maddie's dad quits his job because he understands that they aren't safe from like the bad guy-ness of whoever tried to kidnap the president's wife. And so she spends the next 8 years growing up in Alaska, remote Alaska. And she lives with just her and her dad. And then when the book kicks into gear, Logan is getting in trouble for misbehaving as a 16-year-old first son of the White House and gets sent to Alaska. And I don't even want to say hijinks ensue because it's like they get like kidnapped basically and like forced to wander through the Alaskan wilderness and like survival skill. They're getting hunted. They're trying to like find each other, and like the Secret Service agents have been killed who were supposed to be protecting Logan, and the dad is like, her dad is out doing helicopter-y save the science-y stuff. I don't know. So it's really just the 2 of them. And that's probably more than you want to know about the plot. But it was readable. It was fun. It wasn't my favorite thing I've ever read. I love a main character named Maddie. It's spelled like I spell it too. I also thought that she did a good job building Maddie as a 16-year-old girl who likes glitter and likes to paint her nails whenever her nail polish isn't like frozen through, and who wants magazines when her dad comes back from like civilization, and also being someone who's incredibly competent and has a ton of survival skills and a ton of strength and understanding about what you have to do to survive in Alaska. And So that was one of the funnest parts. Logan was a fun, like, counterpoint. I thought the character of Maddie was built interestingly. Logan was totally fine. What was confusing to me was the bad guys and the geopolitical of it all, and the twists that come in. I was still kind of confused after they happened and what was going down from there, which is not exactly where you want to be. But it was a good time. I don't have any huge things to say about it. Unlike book of July, number 2, The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. I got the pretty new version. I think this is gorgeous. I know there are people who are attached to the originals, and those are nice too, but I'm happy with this. I actually bought it at O'Hare from Barbara's bookstore, I think. I don't remember what terminal it was in, but the woman who was checking me out has worked there for 20 years, which is so cool. And this book was so cool. And I loved it. I was like obsessed with it for like a week or two afterwards. And I was like, oh, I kind of hate like being obsessed with things because to me that feels like a lot of energy that like has nowhere to go. And that's fine. That's how life goes sometimes. I don't need to tell you anything about the Hunger Games because that's not where we're at with this book. This book is transcendent. The movies are everywhere. I just want to say I thought it was so interesting. I was so happy to read the book, even though I've seen the movie more than once. And that's not always the case. After I read the first Harry Potter book, I was like, that didn't feel any different from the movie. I don't really feel like I'm like glad that I read that necessarily. This one was not that way. I was so glad to be reading it. I felt like it was different. Like she was in the arena for so much longer. The opening part where she like almost dies of thirst because she can't find water and she walks for like days, like yeah, this was just so well done, and I'm excited to read the rest of them. This is a little weird. I read the only other Suzanne Collins book I've read, because I hadn't read this before, was Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. So the first prequel before the new one with Haymitch, Sunrise on the Reaping, before these three, this one and the next two. And that book is so well written. So I was ready to go in terms of the talent of Suzanne Collins. The closing couple scenes in that book blew me away. She has Cornelia Snow like walking through the forest. Is this a spoiler? I won't spoil. And the way that she builds and describes that scene and what's happening in it is masterful. Like when I was reading it, I was so impressed. And I think you can tell her writing is a little younger in this one, but it's still well done. It's spare. It's so fun to read, and obviously dark also. But I loved it. It's fun. Okay. We are going to go from Hunger Games to okay. We'll see if this works. Hunger Games 2, The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. The connection is war and violence. That's tenuous, but I'm going to keep going. Hang on. No, I was going to think about more, but no one is grading this. So, if it works, if I can't get to the next 3 books and have to end the book ladder, that's fine. The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay by Michael Chabon came out in the early 2000s, and it was on Roxane Gay's list of best books of the century. So I'm still interested in the New York Times list that came out, and have had pretty good luck with the books from it that I've read, just because there's something about knowing that a book is going to be like baseline well written that's pretty appealing to me, versus is something like this, like Nettle and Bone, or ones that don't have a ton of people pushing them, like the ones that landed on the New York Times Best 100 list. I read Salvage the Bones after it was on that list, and Roxane Gay's top 10. So different authors like submitted their favorites, and you can see which ones they put. So this one, as you can tell, is in favorite fiction. It's on that list. Bel Canto is also on that list. I think I had read it before. Demon Copperhead is on that list, actually. So 3 of these 7, 1, 2, 3, 3 of these 6 are from there. So I'm looking at the ones I'm interested in from the official top 100 best books of the century. I am also really interested in the 10 that Roxane Gay nominated because I love her writing and her taste in writing. So one of the books from that was Her Body and Other Parties. She nominated this one controversially, meaning Teddy and I find this controversial, that she put that one instead of In the Dream House, because this one is a wider cult classic type thing. It appeared on the reader voted list, which was a second list of a top 100 that also had Know My Name on it, which I believe that would be in my top 10 too. So Her Body and Other Parties was on Roxane Gay's, Salvage the Bone was on Roxane Gay's, and this one was on Roxane Gay's. So I ordered it to the shop. We didn't keep it in stock. And then eventually I got around. I was like, okay, I'm going to buy it. Once I buy a book, it moves up my TBR pretty significantly. And guys, I finally picked it up. It was so good. And I'm laughing because it is a World War II book, and it's partially about comic books, both of which are things that I would not see myself getting into. And as I was starting it, the writing was strong enough. I knew I was going to read it and read the whole thing, but I was still kind of thinking, why am I reading this? Is this going to be something that I think works? And oh my gosh, I will say this. I love a book that reminds me that life is long. That's how The Color Purple is. That's how Demon Copperhead is, even though that one's only covers about 25 years. Love is a Wild Assault is that way. And sometimes a book does that by just covering decades of the main character's life. And sometimes it does it by virtue of the transformations that it gives the character, whether it's over 1 decade or 5 decades. So this one has 2 main characters. Let's see if it'll. Heck yeah. It is set in New York, largely, and it's cousins, Sammy, Clay, and Joseph Cavalier. And Joseph escapes from Prague, Czech Republic, right before World War II and arrives in Brooklyn, where Sammy has always lived. And they begin to design comic books together, and they just get in right where the timing is great for that. And that's a good intro. So much happens after that. And the twists and turns, the family, the people that you meet, it was just incredible. And I also was really impressed when I was flipping back through how economical he was with the language. Like, it looks like a long book. It is a long book. A lot of things happen. And I would be flipping through a scene that was super crucial, and it would be like 4 pages long. Like, not a paragraph, not a word is longer than it needs to be. And the construction of this is so impressive. It's only telling you specific scenes, specific sections of years, and assembling all of them. And I just thought it was so effective. I thought it was magical. I thought it was so full of love. Joseph Cavalier, the cousin who comes from Prague, studied magic, tricks, and escape artistness as a kid in Prague. And so you get some of that backstory. That plays into the comic book they create. It plays into some of the plot points later in the book. And it creates one of the main themes that Chabon explores throughout the book, which is illusion, reality, and like pulling off feats of things that we don't think should be physically possible. And what does it mean to escape Prague? What does it mean to escape yourself? What does it mean to escape war? And the way that he uses something so physical and literal as a theme is so artful. And it reminds me like of the Substack article I've talked about before, where it's like books are kind of too obvious now. I think that's a generalization, but I do think there is, I don't even know if I would say it's a trend, maybe just like a second level of book being written. Like if this is literature, if this is this, if this is something that handles its themes really with a light touch really well, then there's a pretty wide swath of books here that maybe you wouldn't call literature that are a little bit obvious in places. And so sometimes that's fine. Like sometimes you want to read a book that's a little obvious about its themes and you don't expect it to be literature. Sometimes you want a little more from a book. I felt that way about Banyan Moon. I've felt that way about a decent number of fiction books I read recently, but when you read one that handles everything with such a light touch and so compellingly creates a story about family and creativity, and it's just such a privilege. It's just like so special to get to read. I don't want to say anything else except that you should read this book. And it was incredible. It was special. It was a good one. I've got this like thing from Cavalier and Clay. We're gonna book ladder to the Grimkeys. I think I just figured out how I can get us to the next book, which is good because this one was a tricky one to ladder. This is The Grimkeys by Carrie K. Greenidge, and I found this book at Magic City Books in Tulsa. I think they had it as a face out, and I kept an eye on it forever, and then I finally bought it, I think like on a separate trip to Tulsa, because they were the ones who had helped me discover it, and I really wanted to read it. So Sarah and Angelina Grimke were two white women who grew up in a slave-owning family in Charleston, South Carolina, who moved to the North and began advocating for the abolition of slavery. And I was familiar with them from school, just here and there. And then Caroline and I picked Appeal to the Christian Woman of the South for one of her declamation pieces to memorize in middle school. And so I had known who they were, just that, basically that little bitty bit. This book talks about the Black members of the Grimke family, which I knew nothing about. So basically, Sarah and Angelina's older brother Henry would rape his slaves and then they would have children. Because of the timing, some of those children, some of them lived in Charleston as slaves. Some of them lived this sort of like in between life where they could work, where they would work during the day and then they could also kind of do their own work on the weekends. And then some of them moved up to the North, Pennsylvania specifically, and were taken care of partially by Sarah and Angelina. So if it sounds like that was a little bit of a confused retelling, it's because I was confused most of the time when I was reading this book. And that was a bummer because I think that whenever you can taste the research like chalk in your mouth when you're reading a book. It's such a bummer because if they had just written better, that sounds simplistic, but in whatever way every individual book maybe would need to be improved, you know that you would be learning something you would care so much about or be really interested in. And so I was really frustrated with this book for not giving me that, for not telling me the information in a way, not that I could remember it, but that I could even understand what was happening and why I was being told things in certain orders, chapter on chapter, like paragraph on paragraph. I was so um I was trying really hard. I don't even think I started skimming until almost 200 pages in. So I was reading this crunchy, difficult writing, hoping and trusting that it would start to build on itself. It would start to make sense why I read this one chapter about this part of the family, this other chapter about this other part of the family, and it just didn't come through. This book was chock full of research, but not written well enough to be worth reading, which is such a bummer when that happens because the really strong books, you don't taste the research, but you know it's there. Um, this book, you're just like choking on the research and you also don't really know what's going on. So I was trying to just a second ago say like, I think what she was trying to do here was, and I couldn't like finish the sentence because I had so few of the ideas like correctly organized in my head. I couldn't even like push any of them out. There were a couple interesting things she said here and there. I think that she compiled a lot of information that maybe if you were writing something about anyone who was mentioned in here, that would be good that it was all in one place, but I don't recommend that book and I'm bummed. If you want to read something that has a ton of research but is just fluorescent and gorgeous, I would read Our Secret Society, which is about one of the premier fundraisers for the civil rights movement, Molly Moon, and she's incredible. And this book was so easy to read. And I really believe that like what's the Zinsser sentence? Like a well-constructed sentence is no accident. We have him up here. Yeah. The Grimkeys did not get that. Okay, book ladder from the Grimkeys to These Precious Days. Oh my gosh, I forgot about that one. Oh my gosh. Okay. I think I'm not gonna book ladder. I'm ending the book ladder after the Grimkeys. I can't remember what I thought I had thought of a minute ago to jump from that historical tome to These Precious Days. I mean, you could be like, these are both pieces of nonfiction, which is true. Written by women, also true. So we'll go that. But this is an essay collection by Ann Patchett. She has written a little bit of nonfiction, but she's most well known for her fiction. Anne Belcanto by her and Tom Lake by her are the only other two that I've read. I was astounded by Belcanto. I thought it was so incredible and effective. I also adore Tom Lake. I really, really, really loved getting to read her write in the essay genre. She has been writing for a really long time. She is so talented. And I love essays. I love just the skill of watching someone create an idea through writing. And some of these, especially like the first couple essays, she just like landed them on a dime. Like stuck the landing like Simone Biles doing a vault that's like 14 levels too easy for her kind of thing. Completely solid. It was so fun. And it's so cool to read a piece of writing that's like 8 pages long and then get to the last page and be like, what, it's over? And then just kind of stare out into nothingness and think about all the things you just learned from what they just learned that were so, so well communicated. And I think I'm also happy to be talking about this because of how I was a little bit disappointed by the one that we talked about before. I switched ice packs. So, what do I want to say? I almost want to tell you something about every single essay in here, which, am I going to do that? Let's just do a little flip. Let's just flip through. Okay, I don't think I can flip through the actual book and talk about every single one because this is not the format for that. That would take way too long. I'm gonna look at the table of contents. I'm gonna give you just some little teases, little trailers, just a glimpse of what you could experience if you prioritize this book, which that's what it took because Teddy had told me about this one over a year ago and I finally got around to it. So glad I did. The first Thanksgiving, she writes about being in college as a freshman and making a Thanksgiving meal in her dorm room and inviting people over, and how that for her was like this moment of like growing up, and one of those moments where looking back now she sees that as kind of an important moment. My year of no shopping. Oh, she wrote one about a modern day saint and this man caring for the homeless. That was incredible. She got asked to write about a saint for a book and she was like, I think all the ones who are like dead have already, I don't want to like rehash. People have already covered that. But there is this guy in Nashville I know who works with people in poverty and I would absolutely write about him for you. And they were like, great, thank you. That one is great. She wrote about Eudora Welty, who is a Southern writer that I have barely heard of. And that was so cool. As I love Flannery O'Connor, who's like a female Southern writer also around the same time. So I'm excited to get into Eudora Welty. Flight Plan is about her husband flying planes. And all of the stories about Carl, which is her husband's name that came through here, were just good vibes. He's older than her and has kids. She married him after that and she doesn't have kids. And she has a great essay in here about not having children and what that decision is like and what it's been like to be a woman who chooses not to have kids that like required reading, especially if you are someone who doesn't want to have kids or has chosen that. She's like, she can be your patron saint of choosing not to have a kid. And she does phrase it as no, I don't want to summarize because it exists as a full piece of work and it like deserves to be read that way. And that's what I'm struggling with here of like kind of when you summarize an essay, if it's a really good essay, you're actually not going to be able to do it justice and you're going to make it sound kind of dumb when really it needs to be read start to finish. The Nightstand. This one is great. Okay, I will give you a teaser for this one and then I will be done. Right? Yes. Okay. So she gets a call. I'm going to get the details wrong. And this guy is like, hey, I found this award you got. She's like, what? Ann Patchett is an award-winning writer. She also owns and runs a bookstore in Nashville called Parnassus, which I've been to, which is written about in this book, which is a great chapter in there. And so this guy is like, yeah, you won this. I mean, like a little award for some high school thing. Maybe even middle school. And she's like, okay, that's fine. Like, you can throw it away. And he's like, no, this is important. And like, she can hear the wife in the background. And they're like, wait, are you like Ann Patchett? And she's like, yes. And they're like, oh my gosh. She's like, okay. And she's really not into it. She tells them to throw it away. They're really not. She's like, oh my gosh. So they're like, we're going to drive into Nashville. We can meet you at like the bookstore and we'll give you this because we don't want to throw it away. And it was in a nightstand that they had bought and it had fallen back behind the drawer. And then she uses that. I don't want to say she for her, that kicked off this exploration of what does it mean to look back on things that you previously wrote. And her mom and her dad kept separate things. Her dad was kind of like the clippings, awards, articles about her. Her mom kept some of her short stories and stuff. And a librarian from the Librarian of Congress was like, from the Library of Congress had asked her to please like send her papers. Like, we want to have the Ann Patchett papers. And she was like, I literally don't have anything. No. And they were like, just anything. And she was like, no, like I edit as I go. Like, it's not like there's even like drafts of my books or anything. But when she meets up with this man and his wife to receive this award that they really did not want to throw away, she begins to open up to the idea of looking back through a couple of boxes that like both of her parents separately had saved. And the ideas that she gets into are so much bigger than just finding a piece of paper on a nightstand. But that's what you want. That's what you want from an essay. And this whole collection was great. I thought of one more thing about this one. She buys a flight to Europe, and she's like in her 20s, and she doesn't go catch the flight. Like, she's sitting in her room and her bag is packed and she's not going to the airport, and you're stressed, and she doesn't know why. And then within an hour, like, she has missed her flight, she gets violently sick, and she is so validated in her decision not to go to the airport, and also like so wondering how she knew. And it ends up going into a story about inviting her boyfriend at the time to go on the trip to Vienna with her within the year, because it was like a travel agency thing. So the ticket was good for a year. And it goes into like their relationship, different things about that and the timeline. I one time was supposed to meet Bug for dinner in New York City, and I was like, I cannot go. I had no reason to think that. I do not flake on people. I don't do. And I was like, and I knew I should cancel on her, but I couldn't do that. And so I said, Bug, I want like you to pick up the food and bring it to like my Airbnb. And I got so sick within like an hour and would have been sick at the restaurant. And so it was wild to have someone have that same experience of like premonition and then having it so validated and being deathly ill. And I had just never heard something like that before. And that's like a very, not like a major memory in my head, but when I was reading that, I was like, I have experienced this. And that's something that you want from books, which is like to experience something similar to what you've been through. So it's a good collection. Our last book is Sandwich. We're going to do Women Over 50 book ladder, female writers. Catherine Newman. She's the author of We All Want Impossible Things, which I haven't read, and Wreck, like a car wreck, which comes out in October, I think. And this book came out last summer. It is set over 1 week at the beach. And the main character is a woman, and she has her husband and her 2 adult children. The son is there with his girlfriend, Maya. And then her parents come halfway through the week. They're staying at just this like rundown. We always go to the same little cabin at the beach every summer. And I thought it was so precious. I laughed. I didn't cry, but a lot of people cry at some point in this book. It manages to be really light and really enjoyable while also having a lot of really heavy themes and like revelations, things shared like between the family members throughout it. There's a dynamic that was also present in Tom Lake, which also has a mom of adult children main character, where because it's a book and you get to see inside people's heads, like the main character will say, oh my gosh, my husband is totally right about this. And then the dialogue opens, like open quotation marks. And she's like, you're so wrong. Like, stop this, blah, blah, blah. Or anything where, in this one, there's this moment where she's like, oh, if I was talking to Maisie, I could say this, but I'm talking to Nell. And so I can't say this to Nell. Like, the way that you change how you express yourself because you're around, I don't even want to say family, like just the way that we change what we say because of the different like roles we have to play and fill in the social environments that we're in. And then also like sometimes how we can like sabotage um ourselves through like not feeling like we're brave enough or like not being in like a good enough mood to say the thing that would be gracious or the thing that would be whatever. And I thought that was so well done in this book. Someone at the shop was like, that main character is such a brat. I shouldn't say brat, but just kind of like that she was really passing judgment on her in a way that I just didn't feel when I was reading this. Like I felt like she was so just like human and good. It was so good. And it was so cozy. And it had a little more heft than a normal beach read. And it really, like, I laughed aloud a couple times. I also read it so fast. I mean, like, a day, maybe two. And yeah, it's called Sandwich, I think, because, like, generationally, she's between her parents' generation and then her kids' generation. There's also this great scene in it where she she makes the sandwiches like every day before they go to the beach. So she like makes they fill the cooler with all the stuff, but she's the one who makes sandwiches. She knows like everyone's like little things they do or don't want in the sandwich, and it's like all this work, and she likes to kind of like complain about it and just like make a big fuss about it, and everyone's like, thank you so much, mom, blah blah blah. And even that, just like the vibe of that, I found really adorable isn't quite the word, but like it's different to have adult children and to want to care for them because you're so happy to be around them, different from what it's like to be a mom of kids where you're overwhelmed all of the time and like you don't actually want to make 12 different sandwiches because you are also doing all of the laundry and all of the housework and all of these other things that are happening. So she's making the sandwiches. She's looking in the fridge. It's like the last day. She's like, okay, we've got a dozen eggs. Like I'll boil the eggs. We'll do like kind of egg salad sandwich things. And then like one of the kids is like, oh, I don't really. And then one's like, and the dad's kind of, and one of the kids is like, let's go to the sandwich shop in town. She's like, what? And then the other kid is like, oh my gosh, I don't want egg salad sandwiches either. I would love to go to Steve's or whatever it's called. And she's like, because like this sandwich is like her thing. You know, it's like the last day. The kids are all about to sleep, like all this stuff. And so she takes the eggs and just like steps on the trash can and drops them, the full dozen raw eggs, like into the trash can. It's like, fine, we'll go to Steve's. And like busts out laughing. And it's just like such a good moment and so specific and so funny and so like real and related to all these different pieces and themes that are elsewhere in the book. So I totally enjoyed this and I would recommend it. Okay, guys, I've been meaning to get around to these July books for a while. I even shelved them before I had to unshelve them for this. So let's talk faves. I loved Sandwich. We'll keep them on the table. I loved These Precious Days. Solid. Weak. Ow, that's so heavy. Solid. Great, but I'm putting it in the mid pile. Or the middle. The solid pile. Solid. And then this one is probably my favorite of the month. Although, there's no need. There's no need to pick just one. These three were the best three I read in July. And you should read them because they're worth your time. This one actually made it into the Hall of Fame, which is hugely exciting and really hard for fiction to do. We'll see if it stays there or if it lands in favorite fiction, but still, either way, all the love. All right. I'm sleepy. It's late. No, it's not. It's 9:45. Goodbye.